Happy holidays. I'm Regina Manyara, and now we want to put matters into perspective. What were the highs and the lows of the year 2022? This is KBC Channel 1 and Year in Review. We start off with matters politics. The year 2022 was a general election year. Here are the highs and the lows of the political scene.
So, in accordance with the law, the constitution and the law, I, Wafula Chebukati.
The final announcement was made and he rose Kenya's 5th president-elect.
Hereby declares that Ruto William Samoei of ID number 6847208 has been duly elected as the president.
William Samoei Ruto, upon receiving his election certificate, took to the podium to address the nation.
I want to thank God for getting us to this point. I want to thank God that today we have concluded this election.
He thanked the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission for conducting a free and fair and credible election, saying the posting of the presidential results on a public portal was a game changer.
I want to congratulate the IEBC for raising the bar. And I want to say, without fear of any contradiction, that one Wafula Chebukati is our hero. Soft-spoken, but firm.
Ruto acknowledged his voters and promised those who did not vote for him that he will be a president for all.
I want to promise that I will work with all elected leaders and all leaders in Kenya so that we can fashion a country that leaves nobody behind.
To his main competitor, Azimio's Raila Odinga, Ruto promised to work with the opposition on oversight of his government. He said the people have assigned roles to both the executive and opposition, which are important for the development of the nation.
I want to promise the people of Kenya that I will run a transparent, open, democratic government. And I will work with the opposition to the extent that they provide oversight over my administration.
Acknowledging President Uhuru Kenyatta, who he deputized for a decade, Ruto said he will build on the foundation put together by the outgoing government to take Kenya to the next level.
I, William Samoei Ruto, in full realization
of the high calling I assume as president
of Kenya.
13 minutes past 1 p.m., Kenya had a new head of state, with William Ruto taking oath of office as the 5th president as prescribed by the Assumption of the Office of the President Act.
I have the honor and privilege to...
The swearing-in ceremony entailing two parts. The first, led by the judiciary, who saw Ruto, who arrived at Kasarani as president-elect, taking oath of office in an exercise conducted by the Registrar of the Judiciary, Ann Amadi, and witnessed by Chief Justice Martha Koome.
Tumpongeze His Excellency, the 5th President.
5 minutes later, Rigathi Gachagua took his oath as Deputy President of Kenya. Once the mess of the judiciary was lowered, the Chief Justice then handed over the briefcase containing sealed oaths to the head of public service, Dr. Joseph Kinyua. Once the judiciary was done, the military took over the event, with immediate former President Uhuru Kenyatta taking to the podium to hand over the instruments of power, which began with the Constitution and then the ceremonial sword. Immediately, the ADC changed to Ruto, who was now Kenya's commander-in-chief of the Defense Forces. And the ceremony capped with a photo session of the immediate former President Uhuru Kenyatta and President William Ruto, and power had changed from the 4th to the 5th administration.
Away from matters politics, and now let's delve into matters peace. They say without peace is no development. As such, Kenya has been at the forefront advocating for peace across the region. Here's John Jacob Curia with the details.
Aware of the risk of conflict flowing into her borders, either actively or through a humanitarian situation, Kenya is taking a leading role in the restoration of peace within the boundaries of her territory. 2 years since the conflict in Ethiopia began, Kenya has been at the forefront in calling for a ceasefire and an end to hostilities. The parties in the conflict, the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, inked a deal early November 2022 that will see the end of hostilities and a resumption of humanitarian aid to Tigray region as they implement the peace agreement. The deal, shepherded by retired President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Nigeria President Olusegun Obasanjo, at a meeting of conflicting parties in Pretoria and Nairobi.
It is indeed my belief that the same spirit of collaboration that they have shown, the same spirit of love for their people that they have shown, the same spirit of understanding that peace does not come from one side but from all parties, is what shall continue to prevail.
We must commend the leaders on both sides for their good faith, for their consideration of the best for the good of all the people of Ethiopia, particularly the ordinary people of Ethiopia.
With retired President Kenyatta appointed President William Ruto's peace envoy, the former head of state is facilitating talks between the Democratic Republic of Congo government and M23 rebels. Both parties have agreed to silence the guns and talk. Happening under the auspices of East African Community, the warring parties have held several meetings in Nairobi, including the last week of November, to draft a roadmap to the restoration of peace in Eastern Congo.
The government assures you, Your Excellency, and the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as the entire East African region and Africa at large, of Kenya's unwavering support and of our determination to stay this course together until the job is done. Mr. President, you are not alone, and I want you to let our brothers and sisters in the DRC to know that they are not alone.
It is therefore in the interest of all of us to stay the course and not let the situation be a perennial problem. On this, you can count on Rwanda's full support.
The peaceful solution should be the outcome of the dialogue.
That's why we are determined to work together. Over the past month, the head of states of the East African community has done all the efforts necessary to restore peace and security in Eastern DRC. We have to, for once and for good, to make efforts to give chances to our common desire to rebuild together our country.
Nyinyi wenyewe mkubali ya kwamba nchi ni yenu na mnaitakia amani na mnataka sasa majembe, vyombo vya kujenga manyumba, muweze kuhakikisha ya kwamba utajiri wa Kongo ni wa kuwasaidia, sio wa kumwaga damu zenu.
Meanwhile, Kenya has sent a 900-member force to east of DRC to join the East Africa Regional Force to quell violence in the areas falling under the east of Congo.
For years, peace has eluded the DRC on accounts of insecurity caused by armed groups and rebels who continue to target security agencies and civilian populations. As neighbors with various interlinkages, the destiny of DRC is intertwined with ours. We all have a stake in a stable Democratic Republic of Congo.
This contingent is structured at battle group level and has been prepared, well trained and equipped appropriately for the attainment of the EAC mandate within the EAC regional force.
Since entering Somalia in 2011 to defend Kenya's territorial integrity under threat from the Al-Shabaab militants, Kenya has been on a mission to stabilize Somalia as it wards off the terrorists. Kenya has since been joined by other forces under the Africa Mission in Somalia, AMISOM, which has since metamorphosed to the Africa Transition Mission in Somalia, ATMIS. On the global front, Kenya sits at the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member. The position maintained over the last 3 years has given the country the latitude to push for the security agenda of the region. President William Ruto, during his inaugural address to the United Nations General Assembly, called for the expansion of the UNSC to promote inclusion and democracy.
In many respects, the COVID-19 pandemic stripped us of many illusions and exposed stark justice and solidarity deficits in the face of existential crisis. It brought into sharp focus the global economy's two-lane highway, repressively patrolled by a rising tide of exclusionist nationalism, a specter that undermines prospects of collective action and significantly impairs the resolve of the international community to guarantee fundamental rights, including safety and dignity of the world's vulnerable majority.
Kenya will be using her diplomatic channels and influence to lobby for the election of Ambassador Nancy Karigido for the position of Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, IMO, to be held in July of 2023. This in a bid to spread the country's diplomatic wings. John Jacob Curie, Channel 1.
Kenya was focused on post-COVID recovery. In as far as matters of health are concerned, the year 2022, the health sector was dealing with another issue, and this is the spread of cholera. Here's Beatrice Gatonye with the details of what happened within this particular sector in the year in review.
The counties affected by cholera include Kiambu, Nairobi, Murang'a, Kajiado, Nakuru, Machakos, Garissa, Meru, Nyeri, Wajir, and Uasin Gishu. Since the first case was reported on October 19th, a total of 1,947 cholera cases and 31 deaths had been recorded in the country by December 2022. The response teams have been working under the coordination of the National Public Health Emergency Operations Center to contain the disease. Interventions include enhanced field surveillance, laboratory testing, case management, risk communication, community engagement, and environmental sanitation in an effort to prevent further spread of the disease. Health Cabinet Secretary Susan Nahumicha called for continued adherence to public social gathering measures such as frequent hand washing as a personal responsibility. County governments were also urged to continue investing in the provision of clean, treated water to residents in order to limit the spread of cholera.
Ni vyema na bora kwa wakati huu kuhakikisha kwamba tunaangazia mikakati, utaratibu wa usafi ufaao wakati wanapeana chakula, kama ni ya kuuza, kama ni kwenye sherehe kama hii ya harusi, kama ni wananchi ukiwa nyumbani. Hakikisha kwamba vile tulivyosema tumefuatilia na kuhakikisha kwamba usafi wa maji tunaokunywa, hakikisha maji umechemsha.
In this regard, the ministry issued a cholera attack to all healthcare workers, highlighting the importance of early detection, confirmation and management of suspected cases.
It is the highest burden of the disease is in Nairobi County, where all the 17 sub-counties have been affected. Garissa sub-county and Machakos County.
Another alert issued by the Ministry of Health concerns the Ebola virus. Members of the public are being cautioned not to handle or touch bodies of people who have died of unknown cause or those suspected to have died due to Ebola. The Ebola Watch campaigns have been running since an outbreak of the Sudan Ebola virus reported in neighboring Uganda in September. Meanwhile, the country has in the last 1 month witnessed an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. However, the Ministry of Health indicated that there has been no significant increase in daily hospital admissions in medical facilities across the country, adding that there was also no patient requiring critical care in the intensive care units. As of December 24th, 2022, the country had recorded 342,470 COVID-19 confirmed cases since March 2020, with 5,688 deaths reported. The government further noted that the ongoing COVID-19 vaccination program had demonstrated the impact of vaccinations in the control of the pandemic by preventing severe disease outcomes, including death. So far, vaccination has been scaled up for all adults and teenagers aged between 12 and 18-year-old to achieve and guarantee herd immunity. The attainment of universal health coverage, UHC, remained one of the key pillars of retired President Uhuru Kenyatta's Big Four agenda in 2022, with several strategies being put in place by the government to ensure its realization.
Kila Mkenya awe ana uwezo wa kwenda hospitali na kutibiwa na kurudi nyuma, kurudi kazini kwake bila kuwa amefilisika na ameishiwa, ameuza vyombo vya jikoni, ameuza vitanda, ameuza kila kitu kwa sababu ya ugonjwa. Wakenya wenzangu, tujiandikishe na NHIF.
The National Health Insurance Fund was chosen as the vehicle through which the population will access quality healthcare services without suffering financial hardship. Implementation was through an insurance model which was found to be more sustainable while still focusing on strengthening health systems. To ensure sustainability and cost containment of NHIF, the state initiated a raft of reforms that will transition and position the fund as a strategic purchaser of healthcare services.
It is commonly said that most families and individuals in Kenya are one illness away from poverty. 1 million Kenyans sink into poverty every year because of medical expenses. We want to lift, and we must, this punitive burden from the shoulders of Kenyans and their businesses through our universal healthcare plan.
The NHIF Amendment Act 2022 sought to compel employers to match the contributions of their work and not deduct the cash from their salaries. Those seeking to be exempted were required to provide a private medical scheme with benefits equal to or better than those offered by NHIF.
Our health reform commitment is therefore threefold. Reforming the National Health Insurance Fund is a necessary imperative. Progress has been made in enrolling more members, and in the last 10 years, 12 million Kenyans have joined the fund. The challenge, however,
During pre-election campaigns, President William Ruto made a commitment to reform NHIF by adjusting contributions so that those with higher earnings pay more.
Kabla ya mwisho wa mwaka huu, kila mmoja wetu hapa utakuwa na bima ya afya ya NHIF. Kila mmoja wetu. Na hiyo bima ya NHIF, kila mmoja wetu atalipa kulingana na mapato yake. Na wale ambao hawana uwezo wa kulipa, serikali ya Kenya itakulipia.
President Ruto said that NHIF contributions will be pegged on the monthly pay of workers in a bid to increase the funding pool of the scheme.
the NHIF is an occupational scheme that is tailored for salaried people on payroll in public and private sector, and not the social insurance scheme it ought to be. We shall change the contribution structure from an individual contributory scheme to a household contributory model.
As the year 2022 came to a close, President William Ruto appointed former Transport Cabinet Secretary Engineer Michael Kamau chairperson of the National Health and Insurance Fund NHIF board for the 3-year term. Beatrice Gatonyangetich, NDA Review.
1.2 million candidates sat for the Kenya Certificate of Primary School Education at a time when government has promised 100% transition to Form 1. Here are the details of what happened within the education system as the country moves from the 844 system and embraces CBC system.
The competence-based curriculum has been implemented for the past 6 years. The curriculum, which at the beginning saw hitches, later took shape. Its first cohort sitting for the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment KPSEA November 2023. Under the Jubilee administration and through former Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha, everything seemed streamlined. The government racing against time to ensure the construction of junior secondary school classes and secondary schools to accommodate learners. Close to 10,000 classrooms at a cost of 8 billion shillings were constructed.
Over 94% of 3,500 classrooms in the second tranche. The first tranche, which was 6,497, were completed in full. That's why I'm very robust at assuring the nation that the government of His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, which I have had the privilege to serve, has kept its promise as far as the preparedness for CBC is concerned.
Now with the directive by the current government that junior secondary be domiciled in primary schools, what is still unclear is, was the decision by the former administration well informed?
I wish to thank the good work the task force did and the recommendation that grade 7s be domiciled in a primary school, because this is where they belong. These are young babies, and joining high schools would not have really haggard well. So thanks to the president and the task force for that good thought.
Home science, computer science, visual arts, foreign language and sign language are among subjects expected to be taught in junior secondary schools under the current infrastructure. This can only be achieved in secondary schools.
The newly constructed classes in secondary schools that were initially meant for the junior secondary school level are now available to ease our strained infrastructure in the secondary schools. We therefore expect to have a relatively peaceful path to the achievement of the 100% transition policy of government during the Form 1 admission next year.
The elephant in the room remains: will the government be timed to ensure the required infrastructure is ready in public primary school by January 23rd, 2023, when learning resumes?
The time our schools open in end of January, we shall be ready to receive our children in junior secondary. My colleagues at the Teacher Service Commission at the beginning of the year will be going out to retool our teachers, preparing them to be able to handle the next level of learning of our learners.
For parents who had reservations about their children between 12 to 14 mingling with those already in high school, under the 844 regime, it's a relief.
It's like the proverbial three-stone stove that you have the student, the teacher, and the parent. The parent plays a very major role. So we have to keep on mentoring our children and supporting them in every way, and they're going to do well.
However, ambiguity surrounding the implementation of CBC transition still lingers.
CBC is a good system. We are going to embrace it. We are just waiting for recommendations and maybe a few changes which will be made, and we work on it the way we've been working on 844, and our learners will really benefit.
Timothy Kipnoso, NDA Review.
Matters of climate are no longer about preference or choice. The COP27 had a clarion call for all countries to work on climate-centric policies, and as such, President William Ruto is rallying Kenyans to grow at least 5 billion trees. Here is a recap of what happened in as far as matters of climate change and environment are concerned, as prepared by Jael Kimtai and Judith Akolo.
The globe is fast moving towards a climate crisis. This fear is arising from the continuing rise in temperatures despite accession to the Paris Agreement, in which countries agreed to work towards climate change mitigation. The quest to see to it that temperatures revert to pre-industrial levels is fast eluding many countries because investment towards climate change mitigation have been slow and in some areas non-existent. Countries in the global south are maintaining that they are not responsible for global warming and keep pointing fingers at the global north that they say has polluted the environment. However, what is lost to them is that we are in it together.
Those responsible for climate change problem have consistently blocked critical agenda items that can pull our people from the quagmire of the crisis they have little to do with.
We live less reassured of the goodwill of global leaders, especially those in high polluting industrialized countries.
The suffering of many due to the impacts of climate change, including the cyclic droughts whose duration has changed from 7 years to below 2 years, is affecting the developing countries more than it is hitting the developed countries.
Africa region, including Kenya, is experiencing the worst drought in 40 years.
During COP27, President William Ruto sought to find solutions to Kenya's green development and secured 500 billion Kenyan shillings worth of green development projects that will push Kenya to among countries that are going green in economic development.
We cannot afford to spend more time skirting around the real issues, and we must break out of the open-ended, process-focused discussions we are trapped in.
While most of the global south continues to demand for loss and damage compensation arising from the impacts of climate change that has affected many through loss of livelihoods, like has been the case where during the drought, a large population of pastoralists lost livestock in their millions.
This COP must agree on a clear, time-bound roadmap reflective of the scale and urgency of the challenge.
But Africa, quite frankly, cannot wait for that specific fund to be completely capitalized. It is the millions to influence the billions to shift the trillions.
Kenya, which depends on safari tourism, has also lost large herds of elephants that form the Big Five.
World-renowned wildlife heritage has not been spared either.
The solution to the elusive loss and damage now lies in countries working with local communities on ecosystem restoration. Such are efforts being initiated by the Northern Kenya and Rangelands Carbon Project.
The soil is able to store more water.
and it also increases the capacity of the soil to be able to absorb more carbon and store it.
If managed very well, it will be the world's biggest carbon project.
Environment Cabinet Secretary Soipan Tuya has in many occasions called on Kenyans to join hands in implementing the 15 billion trees initiative started by President William Ruto.
15 billion may sound so big, but if you break it down to each Kenyan, you are only required to plant 300, only 300 trees in the next 10 years. I think it's doable.
Environment is not rocket science. We all have to put in effort. As simple as planting a tree and not littering, it can create a huge impact. But did you know that by planting crops, it can actually reduce carbon from the atmosphere? Opicho Chemtai for Channel 1 News.
This year, the judiciary has handled quite a caseload. Here's Sarafina Robi with the details of what happened at the courts in 2022.
Early in the year, the Supreme Court dismissed the popular initiative referred to as the Building Bridges Initiative BBI case that sought to amend Article 257 of the Kenyan Constitution. In a ruling delivered by a 7-judge bench, the Supreme Court framed 7 issues for judgment. 6 out of the 7 judges ruled that the basic structure doctrine does not apply in Kenya. 6 out of 7 judges ruled that former President Uhuru Kenyatta could not use popular initiative as a route to change the constitution. 5 judges found that a former President Uhuru directly initiated amendments to the constitution. On whether the constitution amendment bill was unconstitutional, 2 judges dissented. All the 7 judges held that a sitting president cannot be subjected to civil litigation. All the 7 judges also held that there was no obligation on the IEBC to ensure the promoters of the constitutional amendments conducted adequate public participation before escalating the bill to the county and national assemblies. All except Justice Mohammed Ibrahim ruled that the IEBC with 3 commissioners had the requisite quorum to verify 1 million BBI signatures. As the year progressed, most cases concerning the August 9th general election took center stage. This will spill over to the post-poll period with presidential election petition in which Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance presidential candidate Raila Odinga and 8 other petitioners challenged the election results that saw President William Ruto of United Democratic Alliance declared president-elect with 50.49% of the votes cast. A 7-judge bench led by Chief Justice Martha Koome listened to the petition and delivered a judgment that dismissed the presidential election petition.
This also turned out to be no more than hot air, and we were taken on a wild goose chase that yielded nothing of probative value.
The language used in the judgment was put to question.
But the moment the court now condemns you, attacks you in terms of the language in a judgment or a ruling, I personally think that's not right. I've not seen it anywhere in the world, actually. Even when Trump he tried to file an objection, and I saw the courts there have a mechanisms where they first sieve whether there is enough evidence. They just said they don't have enough evidence. But you do not then condemn and abuse, and that's not the duty of the court, because the court ought to remain neutral.
On my part, I think probably the Supreme Court would restrain the justices themselves, with respect to them, from language that can be deemed from being seen as leaning on one side or oppressive on the other side. But however, I say, that's easier said than done.
With the new government in place, President William Ruto committed to signing his first executive order as president. Hours after he took oath of office on the 13th of September 2022, he later swore in 6 judges of the Court of Appeal at State House. President Ruto in December further appointed 20 more judges of the High Court. This would, however, raise eyebrows among critics who hinted at a cozy relationship between the judiciary and on the executive, claims that the president refuted.
I know there is maybe a discussion as to why I am appearing in too many of the functions of the judiciary. I think they can confirm to you that I have never put a telephone call to anybody to ask them to do nothing. My support for the judiciary is so that they can effectively deliver justice to the people of Kenya.
Reforms continued in the judiciary, including an anticipated 3 billion shillings budgetary increment promised by the president. On the flip side, members of the public have also questioned the high number of withdrawal of cases, especially those regarding top-ranking government officials, among them Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, cabinet secretaries including Aisha Jumwa, Mithika Linturi, and other top politicians.
It is not normal. You know, we would have expected this to have happened in 2002 when Kibaki took over, because then is when we were being told there was the Nyayo torture chambers, there were all these political things, and eventually Kibaki brought a new breath of fresh air. But we did not see those withdrawals, like prosecutors being entered by Amos Wako then and even subsequent. We never saw in terms of political cases. And that is when we could have at least accepted. But we could not also have accepted if it is Amos Wako doing the withdrawals, because he was the one perpetrating the same. So the moment he admits that I made a decision based on pressure, political pressure or undue influence, it already means he has gone against the dictates of his own oath, because he took an oath. So for him to now change and say, now I've realized, and because there's a new regime, these cases ought not to have proceeded, is so sad, first of all. Two, it ought to be stated by someone who is actually on his way out, not someone who is in or someone who has already resigned. But more importantly, the fundamental question then comes that isn't it an indication that people can also question the withdrawals themselves?
The political timing is one that we then have to question. Okay, we have a new government of the Kenya Kwanza, and the allegations previously were that there were politically instigated arraignments, and that these people were actually victims of political vendetta. So is the DPP then saying that his office was influenced in a political way that he would mount these persecutions? And if so, what does that speak and say of his office? And more importantly, more fundamentally, the independence of his office.
Key to also note in the year 2022 were landmark judgments, including the Supreme Court declaring the Constituency Development Fund illegal and unconstitutional.
In the CDF case 2022, the Supreme Court held that it is unconstitutional to allocate funds to the CDF before the division of revenue between the national and county governments. In addition, it was the position of the Supreme Court that the CDF offends the division of functions between the national and county governments.
This brought to an end a 9-year court battle between the members of parliament and civil society groups. The Apex Court found that the law allowing MPs to manage funds offends divisions of revenue and public finance law. The NGOs wanted the court to declare that the failure to involve the Senate in the passage of the CDF Act was unconstitutional, and any organ or body established by the Act is illegal, as it's created without the authority of the law. The other major ruling saw the High Court stopping a bid to increase monthly contributions of National Social Security Fund tenfold to 2,068 shillings from the current 200 shillings. The court found that the law supporting the increments was unconstitutional, as it was not subjected to public participation, which is a breach of the Constitution. On the long-standing cases highlighting extrajudicial killings, 3 police officers and a civilian were found guilty of the murder of human rights lawyer Willie Kimani and 2 other people in June 2016. They will know their fate next year. Justice Jesile Seat adjourned sentencing to February 3rd, 2023, after former police officer Frederick Leliman, Stephen Chaburet, Sylvia Wanjiku, and the civilian Peter Ngogi made their mitigation plea.
Because they know him as a good person who does projects back home, who tries to help even neighbors. They knew him as a good man. They knew him as a good police officer.
Your Ladyship, if you do find that the 6 years are not adequate, Your Ladyship, we very much pray and join in the probation officer that you do allow whatever residual term you deem necessary to give her to be served outside prison, Your Ladyship.
Kimani, his client Josephat Mwenda, and their taxi driver Joseph Mwiruri were abducted after leaving Mavoko Lokuts in Machakos County, and their bodies were found dumped in a river on the outskirts of Nairobi. Overall, 404,312 new cases were filed, according to the State of the Judiciary 2021-2022 report. 381,317 cases were solved, putting the case clearance rate at 94%. Pending cases amounted to 678,697,000 cases, with 76% of them being from the magistrates' courts. The report showed the public trust in the judiciary now stands at 76%.
With the current budget allocation being 18.56 billion shillings and a promise to continue to increase the budget allocation to the judiciary by 3 billion shillings for every financial year, we then look forward to get to see how this is going to be factored in the coming year 2023, especially in the most remote parts of the country. Serafina Robi for Channel 1 News.
In the blaze of glory, all good things must stand, like the heroes in the stories. And indeed, in 2022, Kenya had its own share of losses.
Friday, April 2022, was one of the darkest days in the country after Kenya lost its third president, Emilio Mwai Kibaki. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta broke the news at State House, Nairobi.
It is my sorrowful duty to announce to the nation the passing on of His Excellency Emilio Mwai Kibaki, the third president. His Excellency Mwai Kibaki lived a dedicated life of service, and we salute a notable father figure in the chronicles of our nation.
Declaring 1 week of national mourning.
In testimony of the highest of esteem, the nation will observe a period of national mourning.
Kibaki was accorded a state funeral, with Kenyans allowed to pay their last respect at parliament buildings.
Nimetoka huko Nyeri asubuhi. Mimi nakumbuka Rais Kibaki kwa alileta masomo ya bure, akaleta CDF, na tunamkumbuka sana kwa sababu mambo mengi, hata hizi barabara za Thika Road alianza.
Budget tulikuwa tunafanya sisi wenyewe, lakini sasa hivi unakuta kwamba bajeti yetu sisi tunafanya nini? Tunafanya na mikopo. So wakati wake uchumi ulikuwa stable, si kama vile ilivyokuwa sasa.
Maana ile vitendo wametutendea Kenya hii, kama tunaweza kupata president mwingine kama Kibaki, Kenya yetu inaweza enda sana.
He was buried in his Othaya home next to his wife, the late Mama Lucy Kibaki.
Wananchi wa Othaya na Nyeri County kwa jumla, asanteni sana kwa kutupatia huyu mzee ambaye ametendea nchi ametendea Afrika Mashariki na Afrika na ulimwengu mzima kwa dhati, na hatutamsahau sisi kama Wakenya. Tusiseme tu kwa mdomo, lakini kwa vitendo, kwa fikira. Tumuige huyu mzee.
At a very personal level, I can attest, and I am a witness, and I can bear testimony that Mwai Kibaki is the father of modern day Kenya. And therefore, it is befitting that we celebrate his life and we learn lessons from him. And I think a befitting send-off to all of us as we celebrate the third president of Kenya.
With the military granting him a 19-gun salute. The country was hit twice at the start of 2022 with the deaths of former Attorney General Charles Njonjo and renowned conservationist Richard Leakey on January 2nd. While announcing Njonjo's death, former President Uhuru Kenyatta indicated that the veteran lawyer was the last surviving member of his father, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta's cabinet. Stanley Githunguri died at a Nairobi hospital on November 30th, aged 77. Githunguri's family did not disclose the cause of death and requested privacy while mourning their loved one. President William Ruto eulogized the former Kiambaa Member of Parliament as an astute businessman. While condoling with his family, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua noted that Githunguri mentored him into an entrepreneur.
I was just a civil servant working and committing all my time to serve the people. And in our friendship, he interested me in business and entrepreneurship. And I want to say today that whatever I've been able to do for myself as a business person, I owe it to the late Stanley. He sat me down and took me through his story of resilience, of hard work, of commitment, and told me I had a chance to do the same. And he assisted me. He gave me some money. He showed me how to do it. And along the way, when I look back, I owe it to him.
And lawyer Paul Gisheru, a suspect at the International Criminal Court ICC, died at his current home on September 26th. Gisheru had been charged with witness interference and awaited a ruling before he passed away. The late lawyer was interred on Thursday, October 6th, at his farm in Bahati, Nakuru. In December 2022, former Mathera MP Wamai passed on.
Kweli ni kwamba huyu mzee wetu amechangia kiasi kikubwa sana katika maendeleo ya Jamhuri ya Kenya. Walisimamia the transformation of entrepreneurship from the white colonialist to indigenous Kenyans. Historia ya Kenya ikiandikwa, vile utajiri wa Kenya ulitoka mikononi mwa mkoloni kutoka Uingereza ikaingia mikononi mwa Wakenya. Hiyo historia, huyu marehemu shujaa wetu atakuwa na chapter itaogea juu yake.
Wamai, who also once headed Kenya Cooperative Primaries, died at the age of 85 years.
War, global recession, floods, all that and so much more. What was the year like for the rest of the globe? Here is Irene Mchuma Odim with what transpired in 2022 across the world.
2022 has been a year like no other globally. On February 24th, 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin launched an invasion of Ukraine, sparking the biggest war on a European state since World War II. 10 million people are reportedly misplaced, property destroyed, including cities and towns in Ukraine, and hundreds of civilians killed. The invasion in Ukraine resulted in a cost of living crisis globally. The ripple effect was felt in Kenya, with inflation rising in March 2022. On September 8th, 2022, United Kingdom and members of the Commonwealth were thrown into mourning when Queen Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace announced she passed on peacefully at Balmoral. Queen Elizabeth ascended to the throne in 1952 while on holiday in Kenya. Her proclamation to the sovereignty was read on the steps of State House, Nairobi, making Kenya a special place in the history of British monarchy. United Kingdom's longest reigning monarch was buried at St. George's Chapel within the grounds of Windsor Castle in a state funeral on September 19th, 2022. And the highly contagious Omicron variant of COVID-19 spread around the world in 2022. China is now facing a likely world's largest COVID surge of the pandemic, with health officials in the country reporting that possibly 800 million people could be infected with the virus over the next few months. In some regions, schools have been closed, same as businesses. Separately, the summer season of 2022 in Europe produced the worst drought in 500 years, with at least 2/3 of the continent experiencing extreme heat warning. In China, one of the leading manufacturing countries globally, factories shut down in August due to decreased water levels around Yangtze River Basin, which curbed electricity generation at the hydropower plants. In contrast, Pakistan witnessed floods which killed more than 1,392 people from June to October 2022. It also caused an estimated $30 billion in damage as houses, crops and infrastructure were swept away. Human Rights Watch has since expressed the need for climate action. The year 2022 saw the world's population hit 8 billion mark. Statistics released on November 15th showed the global population grew from 7 billion in 2010 to 8 billion in 2022, a reflection of advancements in health. The world reached its first landmark of 1 billion in 1803. Reports project that India will become the world's most populous country by the year 2023, surpassing China, whose population stands at 1.45 billion as of December 20th, 2022, based on Worldometer elaboration of the latest United Nations data. In Africa, neighboring Uganda reported an outbreak of Ebola virus on September 20th, 2022. 9 districts were affected, namely Kagadi, Mubende, Kiengengwa, Kasanda, Bunyangandu, Kampala, Masaka, Wakiso, and Jinja. The outbreak is known to have claimed 56 lives out of 142 confirmed cases, according to the country's Ministry of Health. On a sad note, on December 10th, 2022, Congolese musician Elizabeth Mwidikei, popularly known by her stage name Shalamwana, passed on. The Karibu Yangu hit singer gained immense popularity in the African continent from the 1980s for her Mutuashi dance that reportedly promoted the freedom of a woman's body. The Democratic Republic of Congo's government organized the funeral of the singer, who died aged 64. Irene Mchuma Odim, Year in Review 2022.
We are living in the digital era. Social media has overtaken all the other major platforms as a source of information, whether for entertainment or education. Teresa Mutahi takes us through the highs and the lows as recorded on various social media platforms.
What keeps the netizens going even during the tough times? My best bet is on social media and all the hilarious content that gets created to brighten up the day. This year saw a series of events unfold, and it is my sole purpose to take you through it all. Welcome to the Kenyan roller coaster.
Jesus is Lord!
Earlier in the year, price hikes became a nightmare or daymare for many, biting and draining their wallets. Even milk and unga turned into gold. Mafuta challenge had to be the most hilarious moments of all. Remember the 100 shillings maize flour that had Kenyans rushing to the supermarket after prices skyrocketed?
Maneno nimeona sio mazuri. Wacha nilie kwanza. Oi! Oi! Ai! Oi! Oi!
James wrote, "Wait for bulk buying, then boom, shortage." Sparta tweeted, "Niko na bashi ya sembe," laughing emoji. I won't even try to skip the long fuel queues witnessed countrywide that enraged the masses. But at least we got the lightest moment out of it. Amid all the tough times came the electioneering period. Every candidate had to sell their manifestos in the hotly contended job in Kenya. Lushiri Wajakoya and his running mate Justina Wamae were the illest fare for the netizens as they absolutely captured the masses with their manifestos of growing bang and snake farming. Damn! Well, if this was the animal farm and the hyenas could give their comments, I doubt they would have anything rosy to say about his manifestos.
What are you saying? What is he saying?
But as the campaign period was nearing the end, I am sure this banger was and is still stuck in most people's memories. But the elections period will not end swiftly without some necessary drama. The Bombers choir taught the netizens the true meaning of resilience when the afternoon was no longer a time for lunch, but a moment of pure chaos.
Shangilia Yesu atupenda.
Remember the era of Jose Camargo, wild goose chase, hot air, and results of opaque nature? Now, this period, every Kenyan wanted to show their prowess in analyzing every situation. David Lenku tweeted, "Yani, 2 months ago, we were all political analysts. Last week, we all became mathematicians. This week, sisi wote ni lawyers. Next week, another career awaits us, my fellow Kenyans."
Nakwambia upuzi ambao uko Kenya ni mwingi sana.
The Kenyan Supreme Court was about to be an avenue for amazing content as well after Willis Otieno stood out in the crowd for his famous song of Piki Piki Ponki that definitely lit the wildfires. What a time.
We've reduced it to Mimi's childhood game of Piki Piki Ponki. Piki Piki Ponki. Piki Piki Ponki. Batafielo. Batafielo.
Now, moving on swiftly after the Supreme Court upholding President William Ruto's win, the inauguration would not pass without our Right Honorable Riggy G giving the netizens hilarious content to run with after he chomared Picha during speech reading.
Truly and diligently.
Truly and diligently.
Serve the people.
Serve the people.
And the Republic of Kenya.
and the Republic of Kenya
in the office of Deputy President
in the office of the Deputy President
of the Republic of Kenya
that I will diligently
serve the people,
discharge my duties
The time for the newly elected government to run the show finally arrived. Of all their 100 days plans, the strategy that stood out among the netizens is the Hustler Fund. During the launch day, Rigiji and his mates made most of the netizens stand in awe. Majority of the netizens have heard excessive to comment about Hustler Fund. Aleza, this is my year, amefunga mwaka na fuliza, Hustler Fund na okoa jahazi. We?
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes. Look at you.
Balokole, tagging a picture of a man who has fallen down seemingly drunk, tweeted, we? Uki receive Hustler Fund on a weekend.
Stop wasting your time. Stop wasting your good time, because that is where you go wrong.
Javon, are you sure utalipa Hustler Fund? But the social media being the tool for viral, trendy content, I will begin with our very own Alvin Kaunda, who made the headlines for his kiss with the elephant.
And provide a home.
Well, other trendy content worth highlighting, because mambo ni mengi na masani machache, will definitely be Murife.
Murife! Murife, don't run! Hey! Murife, don't run!
Sina maoni.
Kulingana na mimi, sina maoni. Sina maoni kabisa.
And thank you, very important.
Tumefurahia sasa, hata tumeacha kulia, sasa tunasherehekea. Ni sherehe kubwa sana, hata wasiwezi kusema mengi. Thank you very important.
Anyway, let me leave you with this banger to end the year. From the savage netizens, Happy New Year, guys, because mapema ndio best.
Baby, calm down, calm down. Yo, this your body, it puts in my heart for lockdown, oh lockdown. Yo, you sweet life, phantom, phantom. If I tell you, say I.
For KBC Channel 1, I am Teresa Mutai.
Well, 2022 had its own shares of challenges, successes, wins and losses. I trust and believe that 2023 is going to augur well for you and I. Happy holidays.